very early in the morning. We're on the Underground in London with an activist who is very anti-TTIP. I'm going to do some work on the tube. So these signs that are going in the empty spaces on the tubes are basically meant to imitate the tube signs that already exist, but with anti-TTIP messages. It's called brandalism.
This man and other campaigners say that TTIP threatens food safety, the NHS, democracy and workers' rights. But those that are for TTIP say it will mean more jobs and more things much cheaper for you, the customer. Here's the background so you can make your own mind up. TTIP stands for the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And, as you may have guessed, it's pronounced TTIP. Negotiated in secret, it's a deal to cut import and export taxes and regulatory barriers to trade between the US and EU countries, making it easier for companies on either side to buy and sell. Industries it will affect include pharmaceuticals, cars, energy, finance, chemicals, clothing, and food and drink.
A deal that could add as much as £100 billion to the EU economy, £80 billion to the US economy, and as much as £85 billion to the rest of the world. 2 million extra jobs, more choice and lower prices in our shops, the biggest bilateral trade deal in history.
As you see other markets like China and Asia beginning to develop, and Africa, we've got to make sure that our businesses can compete there, because at least in the United States, 95% of the world's markets are outside of our borders.
Those two are very pro-TTIP. Others are not. TTIP is especially unpopular in Germany. Thousands protested when Obama came to visit. The protesters and other critics say the deal would favour big business and lower standards on products, on safety and on the environment. France has expressed serious concern about TTIP as it stands, and so has our opposition.
As it stands, we too would reject TTIP and veto it in government.
Hi there, sir. Can I give you a leaflet on TTIP?
As well as the London Underground, anti-TTIP protesters are in Leeds today, and I'm with them.
Cut job losses, money for the bosses.
For me, it's a massive handover of power to corporations from governments. There's no problem in trade between the EU and the US at the moment. It's one of the healthiest trade routes there is. And if TTIP was just about trade, reducing tariffs and breaking down trade barriers, I don't think many people would have a problem about it. The I in TTIP stands for investment, and the investment chapter is what really gives corporations the power and takes it away from ordinary people.
But I've also invited along Ali Renison from the Institute of Directors, who is pro-TTIP.
Trade liberalisation has a very good track record of bringing down prices for consumers, making things cheaper to access, giving consumers more quality, a better variety of goods and services that they want. And so at the end of the day, it makes it cheaper to enjoy what you actually want.
And currently, Ali's doing a good job of trying to take over the anti-TTIP stall.
Have you heard of TTIP? No?
What they do?
Ali's running the stall now.
Doing the stall now, good.
So it's basically a trade agreement between the US and the EU.
It's not just a trade deal, it's an investment deal as well. It means that corporations have a huge amount of say.
Oh, so you two guys are in the same place?
No, we're in totally different places.
Yeah, they've got.
I think it's a good thing. He doesn't think it's a bad
thing.
Yeah.
It's too big for me to understand.
No, it's not.
This is going to affect your life. Many people, like this man, hadn't heard of TTIP. Some didn't want to know either.
Just some information about TTIP. It's so difficult.
But public interest and awareness is increasing.
Have you heard about TTIP, the trade deal that we're brokering with the US at the moment?
There are some key debates that come up when talking TTIP.
It just seems very undemocratic to me.
The first is focused on the inclusion in the deal of another acronym, ISDS, which stands for Investor State Dispute Settlement. Now, this procedure would allow companies to sue foreign governments over claims of unfair treatment and be entitled to compensation. And it's very controversial.
TTIP is about corporate power. If you think of an example recently where the Australian government attempted to introduce plain packaging on cigarettes. Philip Morris, the makers of Marlboro, decided to sue Australian government over this and failed on a technicality. But that type of case will be repeated in the future, and it will curtail our government's ability to protect health, the environment and food safety and financial regulations.
What investor-state dispute settlement is about is enforcing international law. It's ensuring that firms can't be discriminated against by governments.
That's a nice version, but tobacco companies suing governments for trying to protect the health of their citizens, that's not a nice version.
But if we look at what they're suing for the recovery of basically their assets. They're not suing to change the actual decision. It's a net balance effect, basically. You take the risk that potentially as a government you might be sued by a firm under a very limited sort of set of circumstances, but the rate of return that you get on that company investing in a country outweighs substantially any of the risk that you take by having one of these provisions.
If you put your email address down, we'll send you some more information about how you can get more involved with the campaign.
But you're saying you don't know too much about it, but you've signed a petition saying you're against it.
What if TTIP is brought in that can more or less sue the NHS?
In the UK, controversy around ISDS has focused on the potential impact on the NHS.
I think it will encourage the privatisation of the NHS. What TTIP does is locks in liberalisation, it locks in privatisation. So if something's been privatised, it's going to be very difficult and very expensive for a future government to take it back in-house.
If you look at all the trade agreements that have gone before, there are always very clear provisions that say the way that public services are organised always remains a priority and a choice for national governments. So there is no way that TTIP is going to forcibly privatise the NHS.
You can trust Walmart, can't you? You can trust General Motors. They've got your interests at heart.
I think it's atrocious. It's a corporatocracy.
Trade, dependence upon each other for positive reasons, is what keeps us away from war.
The other thing your stall's covered in is signs about standards. What's the concern there?
The thing we really have a problem with is issues like food and cosmetics. In the European Union, there are over 1,300 chemicals banned from use in cosmetics. In America, that list is only 11 strong. They want to harmonise this, and we're concerned that this will introduce potentially dangerous chemicals into our cosmetics.
There are plenty of areas, for example, in chemicals where standards are so different that there's going to be no process on changes to existing standards. But what it is about, because you have a lot of companies that trade between the EU and the US, they're going to be impacted by differences in regulation going forward. So a lot of what TTIP in that area is doing is about joint cooperation in the future.
If we leave the EU, this is done away with, we don't need to worry about it anymore?
I don't think leaving the EU is a solution to this problem, because those in charge of the argument to leave are very keen on negotiating a similar deal between the UK and the US. So I think we'll be out of the frying pan and into the fire.
So again, should you be worried? The pro side say TTIP means stronger economies both here and in the US, cheaper products and more jobs. The antis say it means lower product standards, companies suing governments and a threat to the NHS. I'll leave it with you.